It means the rabbis were very concerned on Shabbat that people shouldn't come to stoke a fire on Shabbat, right? One of the things on Shabbat is that you're not allowed to go ahead and make a fire. You can't increase a fire on Shabbat, right? Can't turn up the gas on Shabbat, and you want to make the fire larger on Shabbat, right? You can't do this. Some of the things you can't do on Shabbat. Morning, Boker Tov. And not only you can now, in order to prevent people from making a fire on Shabbat, the rabbis are increasing the fire, stoking coals. In the old days, they had coals was a very major fuel that was used for heating up food. And sometimes we know coals get a little dim, weak, and you want to start raking it a little bit to increase the fire. And that'll be a violation of the Shabbat. So the rabbis created different various safeguards to help ensure that people don't go ahead and stoke the coals on Shabbat. Right? Therefore, there's certain laws. We spent a lot of time early in the tractate in the Gemara about if you put up food, if a person will put food on a fire, directly on a fire, let's say half hour, an hour before Shabbat, and according to some opinions, if it's not fully cooked, and then there's a concern. If it's not fully cooked, there's a concern. You might come to stoke the fire. You might come to, if you keep a pot on a fire, and it's cooking, right? You might want it to hurry up. You might want to hurry past. You might come to stoke the coals. Therefore, the rabbi said you have to cover the fire. Put like a blech, you cover the fire, and that will remind you, encourage you not to go ahead and stoke the coals. So that's one of the things that the rabbis did as a safeguard. We have two people that are looking to get into the class. We have Mark Asby, hopefully he's on his way, and we got Asaf who's coming to join the class. Good morning, Mark. Boker Tov Jazz.
Morning, Rabbi.
Mark, it's good to see you back.
Nice to see you too. I saw you from a distance last night for a minute.
I didn't see you.
By the time I walked over, I think you were gone.
I hear you. Okay. If I would have known, if only I would have known.
All good, all good.
Good morning, Asaf. Okay, we started a new Mishnah. We'll start it again. We're on Nun Aleph 51a1. So the Mishnah now is talking about insulation on Shabbat. As we said, the rabbis does not want on Shabbat. You cannot take a pot on Shabbat and take it off the fire and then wrap the pot on all sides. Even to take a towel on all sides to keep the heat. Contained. So what am I doing wrong? I'm not stoking the fires. So there's a concern that if I'm focused on keeping the heat, if I don't find it as hot as I want it to be, I might come to actually stoke some coals. But the rabbi said on Shabbat itself, you don't take a pot off a fire and wrap it on all sides and insulate it. You can't insulate it on Shabbat. Before Shabbat, the rabbi said, I could go ahead and take the pot off the fire before Shabbat and wrap it on all sides with a towel, because as long as I'm wrapping it not with something that adds heat, it's not like I'm wrapping it in coals and hot ash. I'm wrapping as long as I'm wrapping it before Shabbat and something that doesn't add heat, I'm fine. That's fine. That's allowed. So the Mishnah says, you have the Mishnah? Lo chisuh mibod yom. If you did not cover the food before Shabbat, right? You didn't insulate the food before Shabbat, lo yichasena mishatechshach. You can't cover the food, you can't insulate the food once it's dark. Once it's Shabbat, once it's dark, you can't go ahead and, now we know Shabbat also you have to be concerned for Shabbat even before dark. Once it's sunset, right? Sunset already is the time that you have to stop refraining from doing malacha. You can't turn on lights. You can't do on Shabbat. all acts of labor have to stop by sunset, and really supposed to add a little bit before sunset, a minute, 2 minutes, or something if you can. You want to say something, Moshe? Now, but the rabbis did not give the prohibition of insulating at sunset because the concern that if you're going to insulate with something that doesn't add heat, because what are we afraid? You might come to stoke the fires, so that since you took it off right before Shabbat, it's most probably it's boiling. It's very hot at that time. So if at the time of sunset, it's very hot. You're not going to come. We're not so concerned that you're going to come to rake the coals. But if there's no concern, the issue is once it's dark, maybe the fire already subsided, and maybe you might come to stoke the coal. So therefore, once it's dark, the Mishnah says you can't go ahead and take the pot off the fire and insulate it and wrap it on all sides. Now, but if you went ahead and you covered it before Shabbat, meaning to say you took the pot off the fire before Shabbat, and you insulated it before Shabbat. And then subsequently, then it became uncovered. The pot, let's say, became uncovered. So some learn it means it became uncovered on the Shabbat itself. Some actually learn, the Re says, you're allowed to go ahead and actually, on the Shabbat itself, take out some food from the pot, right? You're ready to fire. The pot is off the fire. Take out some food, and you can recover it once you went ahead and it was covered before Shabbat. And some explain that because we'll continue in the Gemara. So we have this allowance that if it was covered before Shabbat, then you could go. If it was insulated before Shabbat, that means the pot was off the fire. You wrapped it before Shabbat. Now, on the Shabbat itself, if it becomes uncovered, you took out some food. Some say because you took out the food, usually you take out the food for a very short amount of time. Then you can recover it, and we're not concerned that maybe you're going to go ahead and stoke any fires. So therefore, they allowed you to recover it, re-insulate it with something that doesn't add heat if it was insulated from before. Memale et akiton, and now the Mishnah states, you could go ahead, you could fill a jug with water, v'notein l'tachat hakar or tachat hakeset. If you want to go ahead and preserve now some Rashi learns, you don't want the sun to take the chill off the pitcher. You have a pitcher of water. You want to keep it cold, right? Summertime, you want to keep it cold. So you're allowed to go ahead and place it under a pillow to go ahead and keep it cold. An obvious question is, what's the problem, right? What should be the issue that you're telling me that you're allowed to go ahead and insulate something that's cold to keep something cold? So the chidush is, maybe you might come to, if I can insulate to keep something cold, I might come to perhaps think to insulate something to keep something hot, right? If you're going to allow me to insulate something to contain its status, so you might have thought perhaps you might come to insulate something. Yes.
You have a plata in Shabbat.
Right.
You put the food to keep it warm for the next day.
Right.
Shabbat.
Right.
But the ash makes the food cooking.
Right. Exactly. But the point is, I didn't do anything. I'm not, when you do with the plata, Adam, we want to, when you go, it's when you go ahead and you put food, but a plata, you don't put any food on the plata that's not fully cooked. No food on Shabbat could be going onto a plata that's not fully cooked, but you can't do that. But whatever food, you can only food that you can put on the plata on Shabbat is to keep it warm, not the cooked food on the plata, right? And you put salads on the plata. Okay, so the Mishnah, we're 51a. So the Gemara continues, and that seems to be the chidush, that we could go ahead and keep something cold, and we're not concerned that you're going to come to insulate to keep something hot. So that's the chidush. So you could, now the Gemara continues. Amar Rabbi Huda Amar Shmuel. He says, Mutar lahatmin et asonen. So comes the later rabbi. Now we started the Gemara. The later rabbi says you could go ahead and insulate cold food, keep it cold. Now there are some commentaries learn that it doesn't mean that you actually, like, they don't learn like Rashi, just keeping the item cold. Rather, some actually learn. Good morning, Mark. Okay, tough. We got a new member, Mark, Moshe. And some learn that you actually, the food is cold, you're putting this on it to take off some of the chill. You're insulating for the purpose of taking off some of the chill of the item. Right. Rashi says to keep the chill, but some actually learn that actually you're doing it to take off some of the chill. So even though you are, and that's maybe a greater chidush, but the greater novelty is that actually you want to make it a little warmer, right? So that's much more closer to insulating, keeping something hot, right? You have something cold and it's just too cold. You don't want it so cold, and therefore you got to wrap it on all sides. Boker Tov. You're gonna wrap it on all sides, and you might have thought that's actually it's getting warmer. You might have thought that's a problem of insulating, and the chidush is, the novelty is, that is not a concern, since it's not actually really warming it up in any way, just taking off some of the chill. So the Gemara is going to jump on the go. So we had Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. Shmuel is a later rabbi, and he says you can insulate the food, you can insulate the cold. So the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef, so Rabbi Yosef says to Rabbi Yehuda, who says the name of Shmuel, my kamash malon. What is this later rabbi teaching us? Every rabbi, if you make a statement in the Gemara, you're telling me something that I did not know. But if I know it already, if it's a black and white in the Mishnah, you don't need to tell me. You're not telling me something that's already known in the Mishnah. You don't say it in the name of yourself. It's a Mishnah. So my kamash malan, Tanina. We already learned that we have a Mishnah. Adam kiton. You can fill up a pitcher. You want to put it under the pillow, under the bedding, under the sheet, whatever you want. You could go ahead and you could go ahead and insulate cold food. So what is the contribution? As my father, Rabbi London, would say, what's his contribution? What is he saying? What is he adding to us? What is he telling us that you can insulate cold food? Amalei Abaye. So Abaye responds. And he says, Tuva Kamash. He's telling us a lot. He is telling us something that he's telling us that we would not have known without him coming onto the table. Adam, you got it? What is the chidush? Moshe, you following? You got it? Tuva Kamashmala. If from the Mishnah, I would have said the Mishnah is talking about Havamina Hanimili Dava She'ain Darko Lahatmin. Only things that you generally do not ever insulate. Cold water. Cold water is not something that you go ahead. Say it again. I'm saying right. You're insulating, right? You usually don't take cold water to go ahead and put in a pillow to warm it up, because it will. You generally don't do that. That's not the norm of insulation. Meaning it's a type of item. Therefore, since it's not the type of item that you go ahead and usually you want to keep warm, you don't. Therefore, you could go ahead and when it's cold, you could go ahead and to keep its coldness, you would say something that generally people do not use, an item that people will not insulate to keep hot. You would to make you would not be able to. You would say that's the thing that you could go ahead and insulate. Avodah she darko lahatmin. But let's say you have food. The food items, a food people that's much more of a an item that person would go ahead and insulate. Low, I would have said that we might be afraid that if you're going to allow to to keep the food cold, the food is generally a type of item that people will go ahead and keep hot, type of thing that you like to insulate, and therefore you would say that it should be a problem. Kamash Malan, therefore Shmuel teaches us they do not make a gzeirah, they do not make a decree on insulating any food that's cold, even a food that generally you might want to go ahead when it's hot, you want to keep it hot. So we say that that type of food we don't as long as the purpose of the insulation is to keeping it cold, we're not going to go ahead and have a problem. Rashi says, um, generally, cold food, um, right? Cold food. Rashi says it's not. You don't usually go ahead and put cold food on, to warm up, right? Or cold water. Cold water is not something that you would go ahead and warm and insulate to make hot to make it warm. But it's not gonna get warm, right? Cold water. If you go ahead and you put a
But you're cooking.
what? Say it again.
The water, warm it.
But if you put a fire on it, if you put a fire on the water, you'll be cooking water. You can't do that on Shabbat. But if you're gonna go and insulate water, it's not to make it hot. It's not gonna
No purpose.
it's not gonna do it.
I said insulate.
It's when you wrap it on all sides. When if you wrap
Ah.
cold water on all sides, it's not going to really make it. It's not going to really make it hot.
It's insulated. So the big idea is you take a pot and you cover it on all sides. That's it. So that's the basic idea of insulation.
But with the cold water, it wouldn't get you anywhere because it wouldn't make it like hot to cook with.
No,
Wouldn't make it hot for
then
tea.
it really keeps it cold.
Yeah.
What seems to be the chiddush over here is, what seems to be the way they're learning over here is
But you insulate it to keep it warm, right?
generally a food, right? You insulate to keep it warm.
So if I put cold water in the thermos, that's insulation, sure.
Right. That's to keep it cold. Right. So the way they want to explain is that cold water, the insulation process does not really make it
Warmer.
warmer.
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't make it warmer. But when you have a food,
I think in general, insulation is to
maintain the heat.
where it is.
Right.
If really you're gonna say that, then why is insulation troublesome for hot? Because there's some idea that it makes it hotter. Use olive paste, if you use sesame seed things, or like we talked about it, oh no, this kind of insulation, wet, dry, makes it hotter. And that's why it's asur. But if insulation doesn't make it hotter, even hot food, why is it asur?
Right. So the concern of insulation of you could insulate a pot before Shabbat with something that does not make it hotter. Exactly. But you can't insulate a pot on Shabbat with something that doesn't. On Shabbat itself, we don't allow that. Meaning the towel around the pot, you could.
All directions are problem. If I leave the top not insulated, I'm good.
You're good, but that's on Shabbat itself. But before Shabbat, you could wrap the towel on all sides before Shabbat. Now, what is the Gemara? What is the Gemara saying over here? That the difference between insulating a cold item, insulating a hot item. So, or even two cold items, right? We said we're saying that the rabbi. What's the chidush? The rabbi is. What is the novelty of the rabbi? The rabbi again. The Gemara's question was, what is he teaching us? We already know We already know that you can't that you could insulate something that's cold, right? We said that the Mishnah says. So we would have said Insulating something that's cold is specific to water because water, when you insulate the water, your active insulation is not making it hotter. Right? What is the Gemara saying?
I
If you
insulate ice cream.
you insulate, it's not making it hotter. It's not making it hotter.
Same thing as water. Same.
But so let's see. Water, let's see. Water, which was not going to add heat, therefore there's no concern of insulating water, right? That's what we said. And we're not afraid that if you're going to allow the insulation of water, you're going to come to insulate the hot food. But the Gemara says something that a cooked food, which is normally insulated for the purpose of keeping it hot, right? Something that is the norm to go ahead and to insulate. So in the case of an item of a cooked food, which a cooked food, what do you usually do with a cooked food? You insulate it. You insulate it. So
It's already insulated because it's in the pot. No?
right. And again, but now when you want to keep it hot, after you take the pot off the fire, you want to keep it hot.
No, the
So-
pot itself is not there. It's a cover.
It's a cover-
It has to be airtight.
Right. It's right on all the sides of the pot. But we would have said that, but a food,
We're not saying the covered pot is insulation.
a cover pot is not insulation. Right, a
No,
cover,
no,
you have,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
right, right. You have to wrap something around that
Yeah,
pot.
that's
That's insulation. But the Gemara is saying that a cooked food, which is the normal type of item that you will insulate to keep it hot. So if you go ahead and you would insulate it to keep it cold, we would have thought we would have made
Cooked food.
cooked food
right,
that's
zucchini.
that's
It's
cold,
cooked.
right?
It's cold.
It's cold. I would have
If
thought,
I insulate that, I might come to think if I could insulate cold food, I could insulate hot.
right? And that's a
And
chiddush.
that's what
that
I'm.
makes sense.
That's right, and because that's the normal thing that you would insulate, cooked food. So therefore, that's the Gemara's chiddush that we don't make a gzera, no problem.
But I'm not insulating that cold. Why am I insulating the cold cooked food?
Right. So you want to keep. So according to Rashi, you're insulating the cooked food. According, you just want to keep it cold. Here today, you want to do it for the purpose of keeping it cold. You might have thought the other Rishonim say you're doing it.
Keep it cold, I can do keep it hot.
Right. And therefore the comes a chidush says it's not a problem. So the Gemara now continues. Omer Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, "Asel hatmin et hasoneh." Rav Huna says you cannot insulate.
And
Right. Asel hatmin et hasoneh. He says you can't go ahead and insulate cold food. Right. So he says in order to keep the coldness. Now what does he do with the Mishnah? Right? The Mishnah says so maybe he will make a distinction between water and solids, right? Maybe he disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel who allowed solids. Maybe he will allow things that are commonly insulated. He goes on record and he says you can't go ahead and insulate cold food. Vatanya to the Gemara, and that's a quote in the name of Rebbe. There's a change. It says Rebbe in the source of Shas. If Huda says name of Rebbe, you're not allowed to insulate cold foods unless you come to insulate hot foods. So the Gemara, I mean, if you want to go ahead and insulate cold, we say you can't do that because you might come insulate hot. For Tanya, Rebbe hitel hot minute asoneg. Rebbe said you're allowed to go ahead and insulate cold food. So it seems to be of a contradiction. The same rabbi, on record, we have a report that says that he says you're not allowed to insulate that cold food because you might come to insulate the hot food. And we have somewhere else he says you're allowed to insulate. So the Gemara says it was two different times in his career, earlier in his career and later in his career. He changed his mind. Rabbis sometimes change their mind. Not always the rabbis, right? But politicians, they change their mind
Every day.
every day because they have their agenda. The rabbis are changing their mind because they want to be humble and say what they feel the truth is. Or sometimes they might have had their own opinion, but if they heard someone greater than them
They
Yeah.
didn't have all the books necessarily.
Right. Everything wasn't written down.
What
Right.
about in the oral days? Is there anything or ever,
Right. You might not have heard everything. You might not have heard every statement of the earlier rabbi, and the Gemara and
Told over.
so here the Gemara is going to say he didn't know that the certain rabbi said an opinion, and he deferred to that rabbi. That's what the Gemara is going to say. Look,
He changed his mind to
allow the insulation of cold cooked food. You can insulate. Look, Kasha. Before he heard from Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yossi, and one was after he heard from Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. Why? What was the story? He had the Yativ Rebbe. Rebbe was sitting. That you can't go ahead and insulate cold. Like I would say, he's not talking about liquid. He would be talking about a cold, solid food. Like the Mishnah seems to be indicating something that's like a liquid be permitted. Well, cold, solid food is a concern you might come to insulate with other foods when it's hot. Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi told him, Abba, my dad, my father, Rabbi Yossi, my father permitted the installation of cold food. Good morning, welcome, make yourself comfortable. Whether he permitted the installation of cold food, whether it was right, my father allowed it, and most probably, and therefore he allowed even the solid cold food. He allowed you to insulate, and according to the other Rishonim, even to take off the chill, to actually add some heat, you could go ahead and insulate the cold food.
so whether it doesn't matter. To keep it cold or make it warm, you're allowed.
As long as it's not getting right, exactly. As long as it's not going to reach, right, exactly.
Each one.
So there's different opinions. So Rashi went on record. Rashi says you could go ahead.
But
And,
wait a minute, scientifically, insulating a cold food will not make it correct. That's the concept of
Yeah, but-
insulation, is to maintain the temperature.
But
So
this,
if I take egg salad out of the refrigerator and I put it in insulation because it's cold, and I want to get it warmer, that ain't gonna do it. I'm better off leaving it on the couch that's gonna get warm.
Yeah, I don't understand what this.
Exactly.
yes, your question is, what does it mean that they actually the insulated cold food to actually heat it up a little bit, right? To get it warmer. That's your question. How do you insulate cold food to get it warmer,
Doesn't matter.
right? That was, let's see.
Just leave it out. If you insulate it, it's going to keep it cold.
Insulating would keep it cold.
Yeah, okay. It's a
What do you
good,
think the physicists in there?
here we go, yes. We gotta bring David Cohen, the pharmacist.
The closest we.
Okay.
That's trouble.
Okay, we gotta call David. Tell him you miss him, Ralph. Tell him you miss him. Okay.
I don't know where he is. He could either be in New York or a deal.
You think of the thermos.
Right.
Have those igloos, you put everything in there to keep it hot, keep it cold.
Right. So your question, how is it taking off the chill by insulating the cold item? Right. That's everybody's
Even if you
question.
think of the word insulation, what does it mean? It protects it from the outer temperature. So outer temperature could make it cooler, or outside temperature could make it warmer.
But unless it's a
If I
type,
insulate it, I am eliminating the outside.
right,
temperature.
unless it's a type of material that you're insulating with, which is not the type which actually will go ahead.
Like sesame seeds and olives.
Yeah,
We don't know.
yeah, but that right.
That's
So,
not- it's thinking about that.
right. I'm saying so that olive pulp that's left over.
Makes it warm.
Then maybe. So what do they mean that? Maybe they're referring to using that type of material. If they're referring to that type of material, but then there will be a chidush that they actually allowed to use that type of material on a cold item when they know it's not going to reach any real hot. That would answer your question, Mark. If they're allowing the instant to warm it, to take off the chill with some item that actually would add some heat. Maybe that would be a possibility. We have to look in the commentaries more. So what happened was Rebbe first said you cannot insulate cold food, and then when he said that, Rabbi Yishmael said, "Abba, my father, he allowed." So what was Rebbe's response? Now Rebbe was the Nasi. He was like the prince. He was the head rabbi, like chief rabbi of the community. You know what he said? Look at you, the old rabbi already, the rabbi, the old great sage already. Your father gave an allowance. I'm knocking out my opinion. My opinion. See, it's not like the politicians. Politicians change their mind for what reason? Generally, for votes. Today is the day of voting day. They're doing it for votes. The rabbis change their mind because for emet, like that, Moshe, because it's emet. If the old rabbi who's greater than me said that you could do it, I'm ready to allow that as well. You know, a young rabbi today says something, and then he finds out that Rabbi Yosef said it's allowed. A lot of times the young rabbi says, "Okay, if Rabbi Yosef said it, I'm not Rabbi Yosef. He's much greater than me. I'm going to place close." That's how a lot of people say it again. Right. So Omar Papa says, "Bore, come and see. Look how the rabbis treat each other. Look how the rabbis have a love and appreciation and a respect for each other." She'ilu Rabbi Yossi Kayem, when Rabbi Yossi, the father, was alive, he would sit in front of Rebbe, like Rebbe's the big rabbi, and I'm sitting in front of the rabbi. Like I'm sitting in front of, right, when people sit in front of the rabbis in the front, and everybody's sitting in front because the rabbi is the leader. But the Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, was just like his dad. He filled the shoes of his dad. He lived up to that greatness of his father. And he would, even though he was like his father was greater in scholarship than Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, but he still bent himself. You're the leader. You're the official rabbi. I might know more than you, but if you're the head rabbi, I come to sit in front of you. I give you the respect. Nevertheless, even though I give you the respect because you're the big rabbi, you're the official rabbi, but yet the Nasi, who was the chief rabbi, said, "Okay, if your father already gave the allowance, so the Nasi, the head rabbi, said, okay, I give in." So on the one hand, Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yossi, he's sitting in front of the big rabbi. He's like making himself second to the big rabbi. I'm coming to you. You're to the Rebbe, in front of Rebbe, right? But yet Rebbe, who's the Nasi, when he hears that Rabbi Shmuel's, I'll go with your father. That's the way, the honor, the respect. That's how life is supposed to be. And this is when we learned Gemara, Moshe. It's life. Gemara is not just an intellectual exercise. Someone from Goldman Sachs, not really. I told you the story. A not Jewish guy, one of the guys from the community, does work with Goldman Sachs or whatever, and he said one of the members there, or one of these places, wanted to learn Gemara with me. He's not Jewish. So how do I explain to him? I can't learn Gemara. You're not Jewish. He wants to learn it for the intellectual. I said, learning is a religious act. Learning Torah is not just the intellectual. It's a religious act. It's for Jewish people because it's a religious act that we're involved in. We're engaged in Judaism, not just engaged in intellectual stimulation, debate. You like that, Mark? I think that was the way to explain it to the guy. I don't want to offend him, but the other day I can't. Torah is not. It's not a. That's not for everybody. It has to be. Mishpatim lo yida'um. Okay, have a great day, Mark. When are we gonna see you next? Looking forward.